This is AWS On Air Startup, where every single Tuesday we give you tips to help you to be able to build your startup in AWS. My name is Jillian Ford, and I'm a startup solutions architect. If you're new to this, put in the comments where it is that you're from, and we definitely are going to be looking out for your questions. And that's why we do this live. We want to make this as interactive as possible. But we've got some experts here from the startups team. So let's do some intros as people are starting to roll in. David, Renata, Irene, Augustine, hello, people. So let's do some intros. So Anu.
Hey everyone, I'm Anu Jayanti, Solutions Architect at AWS. I've been with AWS for nearly 2 years, and I specialize in supporting the startup segment. Today, I'm excited to discuss about the things that we have to consider before launching the workloads on AWS.
Love it. Jason.
Hey everyone, Jason Wester here. I'm a Senior Solutions Architect with AWS Startups as well. And I've been helping customers for about 3 years launch successfully on AWS. Really excited for the topic today.
We've got people from all over coming in. I'm trying to read through the comments. It's real so fast. Bengaluru, India. We've got Cameroon, Portland, Lazy Coder. So good to see you again, Lazy Coder. We've got so many people. India, Toronto, New Mexico, Luis from New Jersey. We've got Paris, from Paris. We've got Tampa, Florida. Where are you both from?
I'm from Colorado, sunny Colorado, right outside of Denver.
I'm from LA.
Sorry, what'd you say?
Los Angeles.
Los Angeles. All right. And I'm from New York, just outside of New York City. Love this global audience that we have here. And the reason why we do this live is because we want to be able to answer your questions on the topic. For today's topic, we're going over tips and strategies that you should be thinking about before you launch your startup. So usually maybe you are in a stealth mode is the common word that people use these days, where they're slowly building their startup. It's not open to the public. Maybe you've got some beta users, and then there comes a point where you launch. And there's definitely some best practices that we've all seen collectively that really help have a successful launch. But before we do that, the reason why we do this live, because we want to answer your questions. So I always like to start off with an icebreaker. So this is a chance to warm up your fingers to the keyboard. So if everyone in the chat could tell us, what's your favorite movie? Anu, let's start with you. What is your favorite movie?
Three Idiots. It's an Indian movie.
Three Idiots. Oh, we've got some people from India. Maybe someone from India knows this movie. Oh, someone else from India. So maybe someone knows the movie that you're talking about. Let's see. Jason, do you have a favorite movie?
I do. Definitely Empire Strikes Back. I'm a Star Wars fan, but I like the grittiness of that movie in general.
That's a good one. Oh, someone, Three Idiots. Oh, there's someone who knows the movie Three Idiots. That is awesome. Sunk it. Yeah, Interstellar. We've got. There was
Blade
Clue.
Runner.
Oh my God!
Yeah. Matrix.
I am so happy you said Clue. That was one of my childhood favorite movies. And The Matrix. Oh my God, those two are my childhood favorite movies. So. Oh my gosh, Man of Steel, Egypt. A lot of people like Three Idiots, Anu.
Yeah, and there are a lot of people who like RRR. That's my favorite too.
I love it. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Of course, you can keep sharing with us what are your favorite movies. But today's topic really is about what are the things that you need to be thinking about before you launch your startup in AWS. And kind of like to think of it as a checklist to make it simple for you as you're planning out this plan for you to be able to have a successful launch. So I can share my screen and we can start talking about these topics. So let's start with you, Anu. If someone a startup were to come up to you and really say, all right, I want to make sure that I can start scale this startup, what's the first area that we would be look for? I guess I kind of gave the clue away, right? I said scale your startup.
Yeah, totally, Jillian. When we talk about scaling on AWS or launching on AWS, to be specific, there are a lot of things to consider, and scaling, as you gave it away, is the very first thing that usually comes to mind. And along with scaling, the different things that we would have to take care is reliability, cost optimization, security, backup and disaster recovery plans, and not to mention the monitoring and management. Along with all this, there is another area, which is the support. As you can see, there are a lot of things that I mentioned. So launching on AWS can seem really overwhelming. But to help, we do have the prescriptive guidance listed in the form of well-architected review that will help you cover all these key points that I just mentioned.
Yeah, and Jason, I know we have some people in who are watching with us today that are new to AWS. So if someone who's new, they've got this startup and they want to make sure, what are some things that AWS has or that I should start thinking about in order to scale? What are some things that you would tell them?
Yeah, I mean, when our customers are first looking to launch, of all the topics that Anu just mentioned, scalability is the one that comes to mind. They're typically in a development lifecycle. Maybe they've tested their workload in dev. They have some unit tests. They also have QA testing, and it's just important to think about how you're going to handle this increase in traffic and demand after you launch. That's a critical piece that you should be thinking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Anu.
Yeah. Actually, when we talk about the scalability, AWS provides a wide range of services to help your application scale as well as perform well. And some of them that I would like to mention are the auto scaling, elastic load balancer, as well as going the serverless route. When we talk about auto scaling, it actually takes numerous forms. It can be anywhere from auto scaling your DynamoDB tables, your EC2 instances, ECS, and much more.
Yeah, I agree. In terms of elasticity, the elastic load balancers are a great way to introduce elasticity into your architecture. ELBs are there to spread load in your requests across your workload and target healthy nodes. Gives your users a much better experience and lower latency when they're accessing your application. To Anu's point on serverless, right? We provide a wide range of serverless technologies. It's not just Lambda anymore. We have databases that are serverless, whether it's Neptune serverless or Aurora serverless. We even have OpenSearch serverless now. So a lot of great options there.
I love this. And I think from these three things alone, I think this should start getting the wheels turning for a lot of people. Like I know when I talk to early stage startups, those who are starting on EC2, I see a lot who just start with maybe one or instance where they're running everything in one single availability zone. And maybe that's fine when you don't have any customers yet, because you can tolerate what happens if that instance is not available. But that's not okay when you start having customers, paying customers. They're going to be expecting a lot more. So if that sounds like you as you are watching this, set up auto scaling groups is definitely something you want to think about. Yeah, the load balancers and serverless for sure, something as well. And so these are some other main things. Is there anything here you want to add, or or something more you want to talk about web and video related?
Yeah, along with all these that we spoke about, there are several other services to consider, and two of them that come to my mind are the Amazon CloudFront. Especially, you mentioned about the web and the video workloads. Usually, when it comes to the web and video, you want the response time for the users to be as low as possible, invariant of where they're accessing from. So this is where the CDN from AWS, that is the CloudFront, helps in the area for providing the least response time. And one more thing we should always consider from the beginning is CloudWatch. So set up your logging and monitoring so that you can totally get into the weeds and see where the problem is in case it happens. Hopefully it never happens, but you never know. So it's always better to be planned and prepared for it.
Love that. Yeah. What would you say to how would you describe what a CDN is? Oh, actually, before you answer that, there was a question I want to ask. So the question came in as, will this be recorded? Yes. So for those of you who are watching on LinkedIn, this is going to continue to be a post that you can look at back afterwards. So you can go back into AWS's LinkedIn feed, see this post, and you can watch that video. You'll also be able to find it on the AWS Events YouTube channel. So that, expect that maybe next week, come back, you can watch that video. All other previous episodes that we've done are also going to be posts on LinkedIn. They'll also be on the AWS Events YouTube channel. So definitely check those out, because each week we're always doing a different topic that's related to startups. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, and Jillian, you asked a little bit deeper dive on CDNs. I can kind of field that. I have a lot of media and entertainment customers, and I'll put it in perspective of that as far as like video streaming, right? So let's say you have a video on S3, it's stored in a bucket, and you want to stream that out to your end customers. So a CDN will allow you to cache that video in segments and then return that video down to your player where your audience can consume it quite easily. And from that respect, it allows you to reach your audience with a lower latency when you have that video, cached out on that content delivery network on the edge.
Yeah, good call. There was a question here that I also want to weave into this, because we're talking about a checklist, and yes, it's not necessarily specific to an industry. There's certainly going to be some parallels. So I just had this question. Maybe I'll find it. There was someone who asked a question, but I'll certainly find it.
Well, one thing that's not on our list there yet is service limits.
Good call.
Service limits are a big one that most of my customers encounter when they're getting ready for pre-launch. So nearly every API on AWS has either regional or account level service limits. We call them quotas as well. And the key here is really to understand every service you're utilizing from ingestion down to downstream services, and make sure that those limits are set up correctly.
Agreed, Jason. Service limits are a lot of it's very important to consider service limits when you're launching, especially when you're scaling. And I've seen this with a lot of startups. When the service limits are reached, service quotas will become throttled, and thus it starts resulting in a very poor user experience. So it's better to deal with the service limits as and when you can, instead of waiting till the last.
Yes, 100%. Yeah, there's nothing really more to add there. Okay, so there's some good questions that came in, and I want to weave these in as we're going through this. So the first one from Mike, is there a serverless caching solution? And I think we can also talk about how this really fits into the overall picture of making sure that you're ready to be able to launch. Maybe we can, and maybe we can even just talk about caching in general, why that's important. Anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
So from a serverless caching standpoint, if you look at S3, it's actually used as a cache for a number of our own services. And so that is an opportunity for you to take advantage of. In particular, we're building out services, things like open search service, which has hot nodes, ultra warm nodes, and then a cold stage. So those ultra warm nodes actually just go into S3 and bring back data as it's needed. So it's a much more cost-effective way to do open search data storage.
Awesome. I just want to add that you don't have to do any additional steps as well. It automatically does it for you with the ultra warm nodes. Just set it up, and then it does it on the fly.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Mike. Those are great answers. So let's see, there's a couple that we can kind of weave in and then we'll keep going. So again, this is not going to be industry specific, so we won't go to specifically healthcare related for you, but we can still talk about, there's some themes here, and it sounds like we talked S3, we talked about CloudFront. Is there anything else, maybe anew in this question, that you would add for this person?
The one that stands out mostly are the CloudFront is the most popular one.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jason, anything to come to mind?
No, I think those are key services as far as, caching your data to be able to scale closest to your customers from a geographic standpoint. So getting out to all those points of presence that we have and utilizing CloudFront is really key.
I love it. And of course, everything here is definitely going to be able to apply as well as we go through each of these checklists, the scalability, the service limits. That's definitely going to be able to help you as well. And then, okay, so 2 more questions, and then we'll go back into our checklist. So Brad wants to know a little bit more about load balancers. How do they help when someone is thinking about being able to scale their application?
I can take that. So basically with the load balancing, what happens is that you don't have to spin up all the resources for the anticipated workload. Basically, what you say is you place in a front end wherein it's a load balancer, and behind that you have your servers that get spun up. And the number of servers that get spun up depends on the amount of workload or the amount of requests that come in. And it can scale up and down automatically based on the configuration. You can say, if the workload goes beyond 80% of the CPU limit, get me one, add another server. If it falls below 60, take away this server. You're bringing in the elasticity just by a few configurations. Instead of having, maybe you need 20 servers for your peak workload to take place, you don't have to have all the 20 up and running all the time. So based on the request, it automatically does it for you. That's called the auto scaling group, is the setting that we use it as.
Perfect. All right, let's keep going with our checklist. So we covered, is there anything else anyone wants to add about service limits before we move on?
I'd actually like to touch on that topic a little bit more before we move on, Jillian. So
Perfect.
We talked about the importance of understanding your service limits and making sure they're set up properly before you launch. And key to that is actually load testing. So again, back to that development lifecycle, development, unit testing, QA testing, it hasn't really stressed your workload yet. So we highly recommend using some type of load testing format. And then when you look at timelines of when you're going to do these activities before you launch, you probably want to do load testing about 2 months prior to your code freeze, because this is an iterative process. So you're going to load test, you're going to refactor based off of bottlenecks that you've found, discovered, and resolved, and then you're going to retest again until you reach that throughput that you're looking for to scale.
I love that. And as for those who are new to load testing, haven't had to think about that yet, with your architecture, you're also going to want to just do a quick search before you start that process to find out if there's any specific guidelines for each of the services on load testing, because each service may have specific guidelines around that, and you want to make sure that you are following those guidelines for that load testing.
Yeah, you make a really good point, Jillian.
I just want to add another point here. It's as Jason was mentioning and Jillian was mentioning, that load testing is a very big part of it. And this comes in helpful when you're raising your request for the service limit quota as well. Usually when you put in a request, they would expect you to give a number of what the change that you want it to be increased to, as well as some explanation of the use case on why you think this number is and what's happening around that. So to retrieve that number or to get to that number, load testing is a key, which you can add it in your ticket for additional details so that the service quotas are increased for your use case.
Perfect. And just so everyone knows, for people who are new, we're going over the checklist of things that you should be doing before you launch your startup in AWS. I'm looking at the chat and I'm going to be prioritizing the questions that are related to the topic. If there's a question that we're not able to answer in this session, check out AWS Repos. That's a fantastic resource that you can go to ask your questions related to anything, all things AWS, and get those questions answered.
Hey, Jillian, there was a question right on autoscaling here. How to handle, can autoscale handle adding additional CPU or RAM to EC2? Typically, you're actually going to scale nodes out rather than what we would call vertically scaling within the node itself.
Good call. And good question. All right. Okay, so we've got the next one is really reliability is in our checklist.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so the Amazon CTO, Werner Vogels, he is famously said, for quoting, everything breaks all the time. and so that's the way we view resiliency and reliability within AWS. And the way I look at it is it's not just architecture, but you really need to get down to the code level and build resiliency into your code. That will really go a long way for you.
Yeah, and how Anu, how would you advise a startup, because startups have trade-offs, right? I mean, they don't have time to spend hours to make the I guess a system that is like all over multiple regions and stress test across every region. They have to be able to build a profitable business and acquire customers. So there's a balance too. So what advice would you have for that?
Totally agree. Totally agree. Balance is the key, and there are so many steps to consider. So one thing that I usually recommend the customers is to use our reliability pillar of the well-architected review. That basically shows you how to plan your reliability section. If okay, can I share my screen?
Yes, I can.
So that we quickly go through the reliability pillar. Screen share.
Yeah, and as we're waiting, I love the energy in the chat. Keep bringing in your questions. I'm definitely going to be prioritizing the ones that are related to all things of what you should be doing before you launch your startup on AWS. But keep it coming. I'm definitely looking at the chat.
So with the reliability pillar, can everyone see my screen?
Not yet. I mean, yeah, and then if you're struggling to be able to get it, we can always just tell people to look for it, and we can always talk it through if you have it on your screen.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's try one more time.
Yeah, so we have the well-architected framework is available online. It's you could Google it, find it really quickly. We have the different pillars. We have 6 different pillars that we focus on. And you'll actually see as we talk about how to prepare for launch today, those pillars apply to almost each of these major categories that Jillian is going to be making a checklist for. And Anu, have you been able to pull up that screen yet?
I can pull up the screen, but for some reason it doesn't let me share. Let me try again.
Okay.
Well, one of the
can you guys see?
No.
One of the things that
maybe I'll just post it in the chat and we can just talk about it.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
You comment.
And for all the folks who are new, this is something that we do every single Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. UTC. It's this startup show. So if you want to be able to learn about how to build your startup in AWS, this is what we cover every single week. So you can, if there's topics related to building a startup in AWS that you want us to cover, you can hit me up on Twitter at Miss Jill Ford. That's what I put in my name. And I'll be checking those to help really shape what it is, the content that we, the startups team, delivers to you?
Yeah, for some reason I can't share, but let me talk about it a little bit at a very high level. So basically, when we talk about the disaster recovery, the one thing that always we need to consider is the RTO and the RPO, where RTO stands for the recovery time objective. It's the one wherein we say you have to find out for how long the system can be down, and RPO is where you have to find out the amount of time you can incur the data loss. Just by listening to the RTO and RPO, the first thing that comes to mind is, oh my gosh, I don't want to have any disruption, nor do I want to have any data loss. But again, that comes with a cost. So it's always better to check with the business and then come up with a number that is acceptable from the technical perspective as well as from the business side, and then design your applications based on that number, considering the RTO and RPO. And not all workloads need to have the least amount of RTO RPO. So divide your workloads into different segments and assign RTO RPO for each of them.
Yeah.
And
I was just going to say for Jillian, if you have the checklist up, you could put in understand your RTO, understand your RPO.
Yes, thank you.
And really, that's going to drive, what level of reliability you're going to build into your workload before launch.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind is the lowest RTO is the most expensive one, because you would have to run a live system.
Yeah, it's all a trade-off, and it's something that evolves. So you don't have to worry about, oh my gosh, I have to decide this now, and then this is something that is the decision that shapes my entire business. That's not the case. Startups of all sizes, and then even as they become enterprises, this evolves over time.
Totally. Yeah. And it's easy to make the change, as Julia was mentioning. Everything is really flexible. Say today you're just starting up and you just want a backup and restore, wherein you can afford to have a higher downtime. But later down the lane, you're like, no, my business is really picking up, I cannot afford to have this. Then you switch to either pilot light or warm standby, wherein you have some piece of your the resources running, but then not at a scale at production level. And when your application really grows, you're like, no, I want to have a multi-site that is active, then you can go there. So it's a step-by-step process. You can take each step at a time when you reach that point.
Yeah, and to add on to the disaster recovery side of things, I mean, our customers tell us they want an easy way to back up and restore their data and their applications, and we provide a lot of different opportunities, different services for you to build out on, whether it's S3 buckets, where you can do cross-region replication to make sure in the catastrophic disaster, your data is stored in another region for you. We have snapshots. So you could do snapshots for relational database service. You could do snapshots for the Elastic Block Stores, your EBS volumes. And then when you step back, and your startup's starting to grow and you're starting to have more and more workloads and your organization's getting more complex, you often will gravitate towards a service of ours called AWS Backups. So AWS Backups provides like this umbrella or this single pane of view, of glass view into all of these different services and how you want to organize your policies for backing up.
And one more thing I want to add here is that we always do the disaster recovery implementation, but make it a point to test it out thoroughly. Because sometimes we do everything, and then because it's DR thing, it kind of goes on the back burner. We don't want that to happen. And it's always a very good practice to test the changes every 6 months or so, and as well as run your workload in the DR side for a day or two every year, so that you know you're totally prepared for it. And one more thing I would like to add is it's the drift of the configuration. Generally, when developers push their change into production, the DR sometimes can be a mess. So configure your CI/CD pipelines so that you deploy to DR and production at the same time. And one more thing I want to highlight here is, again, going back to the service limits, make sure if you've submitted a ticket for service limit in production and you're running DR in different region, please remember to submit for the DR side as well.
Yeah.
Love that. We've got one question here, and then we can unless there's anything else, we can go on to the next question. So how does someone think about what their backup policies should be? Maybe what are some of the questions that this person should be asking, or these people, these startups should be asking themselves to come up with that?
If you look at a backup policy, it's going to be, you're going to look at how often do you want to do it, right? There will be a schedule behind it, and there will be retention. So how long are you going to hold on to that? And a lot of driving factors can influence how you want to do that. We could talk about the recovery time objective, recovery point objective. That is a key piece of it that is input into how often. Another one is compliance, right? So you might have customers in a certain domain that need to have their data retained for a certain amount of period, 5 years, 7 years or longer. So those drive essentially how you decide what your backup policies might be for your workload.
Perfect.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So yeah, let's get into our next tip of what people should be looking at before they launch. And that's security.
Yeah, when it comes to security, we have a saying at AWS where security is job zero. So you should be thinking about security from the beginning. In this section, in this talk, you might have realized, start off with scalability, then we are coming on to security as the third point. We are doing this because initially what happens is when you talk to somebody, the first thing that comes to their mind is scalability. They're like, can my application run well? Then they would consider about security. So, but then when you're building your application, always make sure that you have the security in mind right from the beginning, right from when you think of putting something on AWS, or right from when you're starting to code. Think about security in mind and do the things related to that. We'll talk more about it during this talk. And usually most of our customers run their workloads public facing. So that means essentially you're opening up to the whole world. Mm-hmm. So you really have to think and plan to protect your application as well as the data. And we recommend to have a strong security posture at all the times, not just in your production, but have it in your other instances as well, something like dev or stage. And right before launch is actually a good time to just go through the checklist, not to implement the checklist, because you've been doing it from the beginning. And some of the items that come to mind when we talk about this checklist is ensure that you have MFA on all your accounts, not just production, and make sure your data is encrypted both in transit as well as at rest, and that you have all the access control policies enabled. And then you should also have a plan about what happens when there's a breach. Hopefully it never happens, but having a plan always helps. And how you would handle that.
Yeah, for sure. From the startup standpoint, I will add into what Anu mentioned. If you look at what Anu said around foundational, right? This is something that you should be doing all year long across all of your accounts. We do have what's called a startup security baseline, and it is a workshop that you can walk through on your own, standalone, just to kind of check some of these boxes. And let me see if I can share a screen. Let me see if I can present.
And while we're waiting, I just want to call out, we've got some people who are just being so phenomenal, who are helping each other in the chat. Harish, Rahman, I see you answering some questions. I see it was Mike. Thank you so much for helping one another, because we want to be able to answer as many questions as possible, but we're going to focus them on the topic. So of course, help one another. Also, AWS Repost is a fantastic resource to be able to keep asking these really important questions that maybe we're not able to answer today. And of course, we have other live streams like this where we go through different topics as well. So now with that, let's go through this startup security baseline. This is definitely something everyone bookmark this page. You want to be able to go through this and make sure you're implementing it. But yeah, please, Jason, go through this.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you look at it, the customers that AWS has, they're they're all across the board, whether public sector, government type customers to enterprise to startups. And what we really did with this, the security baseline is focus on what we thought were the key pieces that all startups should be configuring. And they're broken into what you should do around securing your account, and then what you should do for your specific security side of things on your workload. Let's just take a quick look. We've already covered some of these, so I'm just going to run through really quickly. Protecting your root user. So make sure that you lock your root user down, use your admin privileges to do things like creating other users and launching workloads, but don't do anything with your root user besides the key pieces. We've also got MFA, we've got turn on Cloud Trail. Cloud Trail, if you're not familiar with that, is a logging service that essentially logs all access to your AWS account. And so anytime you're accessing it with CLI or an API or the console, it'll be recorded here. So when you enable this and track it, you can even alarm on potentially nefarious activities. So this is a key piece. And then finally, I'll just skip through enabling trusted advisor and guard duty are key. So guard duty is going to continuously scan and look for malicious activity within your account when you're looking to launch. And then when it comes to securing your workload, again, Anu touched on some of these, right? Ensure your data is encrypted in transit and in storage. So protecting your data, making sure your IAM policies are set up correctly. And I'll just stop there. Very key resource and that you should be checking out when you're looking to launch.
100%. Yeah, really use this as a checklist. I mean, I talk about this when I'm working with startups as a way of just being able to make sure, hey, do at least I have the foundations right. And of course, security is always a constant and never-ending improvement process, but at least I feel like this gives you a good foundation of a place to start, and then you can always improve your security from there.
Yeah. And just one more thing I'll add in. As you walk through the startup security baseline and do each of these steps, we give you an estimated cost. So you can see, like, the cost of this is free. And each one of these steps is going to talk you through that. So, security as job zero is something that we want to have open to everybody. So take advantage of it.
Perfect. All right. So anything, maybe we can go back to the checklist and talk about other topics related to, oh, wait, that's your screen. Where is my screen? Oh, because I got kicked out. That was so weird. I've never had that happen to me before. We'll go back to our little checklist that we're doing together. Okay. So we just went over the startup security baseline. So now, anything else for this startup? They've said, okay, I've done this security baseline. What else should this startup be thinking about that they can do to improve their security before they launch?
It's actually a good idea to start implementing the web application firewall, because a lot of things are public facing, as we were talking earlier, and as you know, there are a lot of bad actors trying to access all the applications over the internet, and it is always better to stop them right at the first hop where you can. Otherwise, what happens is the exploits happen, and the resources gets consumed, which skew up the metrics, and sometimes even we can have downtime. So services like WAF help in protecting the workloads. Let me see if I can share my screen now for present share screen.
And I'll add some extra context to this checklist that we are creating. Are there other things that you can be doing before you launch? Absolutely. But we also understand that as a startup, everything is a trade-off, and you need to be able to focus on getting your product out the door, acquiring customers, understanding their feedback, being profitable, maybe raising capital. There's so many different factors that are going into how it is that you manage your time. And so we wanted to tweak this and prioritize it. So how is it that you can be able to focus on the things that can help you get to that next phase of being able to acquire customers, be more secure, and then of course you can go back and you can implement more best practices. But we don't just want to throw everything at you and then it becomes overwhelming and it's like, how do I know what to actually prioritize at this stage of my business?
Yeah, in the timeline as well.
Yes.
When do you want to actually put some of these into motion? It's critical.
It is, yeah. And that's also the intention of why it is that we ordered these our checklist in this way. I mean, yes, are all of them important? Absolutely. You should 100% do all of these things. But in terms of areas to tackle first, it's like, well, scalability, you need to scale in order to be able to bring customers in the door. So it's like, okay, that's why it's number one. The service limits need to be increased so you can bring those customers in the door. Reliability makes sure that you can have customers in the door. And then security makes sure that you can earn that trust and keep doing business with those customers. So that's like really why we kind of put this in this order this way.
Yeah. We have a couple more we should cover as well. Moving on maybe to cost or support, which are key before launch.
And I love that Mike just put the oh my God, I forget his name. The quote from that. Oh my God, I'm gonna remember it. Mike, probably you know what I'm talking about. The name of the Reid Hoffman. There we go.
Yeah.
Quote from Reid Hoffman. He's waited too long. Yeah, it's so true. So that's kind of how we're thinking about this.
And
when we're at the security, I just want to mention, design your systems to use the least access privilege policy. That's very important.
Yeah.
Jillian, there was a question, or maybe you could feel this. There was a WAF question that came through. I think it was around, is WAF, this is from Jeffrey, is WAF highly available and what's the cost?
WAF is highly available, yes, to that. And for the cost perspective, there are a lot of rules in WAF. Just to mention two of them, or few of them, it is you can. It's like a checkbox. I cannot share my screen, but then if you go to the WAF, you can see if you want admin protection, you just turn it on. You want SQL Server protection, you just turn it on. There are several rules for that. All those come for in the free tier. You don't have to pay for them. But there are two new roles that are introduced. That is called the ATP, that the account takeover protection, and the bot control. Those two are charged. So you have a mix of both, but most of them in the free tier.
Yeah, and you can also get rules for WAF through AWS Marketplace. Go in there and just search for WAF and see what's available. It's, WAF is so easy to set up. And again, you have at least a free set of rules that you can start protecting your workloads before you launch right away.
Fantastic.
And there's a feature there's a feature wherein you can even write your custom rules. See, there is a very specific pattern you're trying to avoid, or there's a specific IP list that you know of, or headers that you want to work off of. So that's available as well, along with the managed rules.
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. So let's keep rolling. We've got some more things to cover, and we're slowly running out of time, which is crazy how this has flown by.
Topic.
So, yeah. Anything else with security that you'd want to cover here that people should think about before they launch?
One quick thing I'll just note it before we maybe start moving on to cost. Don't deploy on your dev account. So this happens so often, right? Where we're building an MVP or POC, we're just building out in dev account and then we launch it. It's key thing to keep in mind is you want to have those isolated. So use a multi-account approach, have a dev account, stage account, and then a production account that you lock down.
And always remember to restrict the access,
Yep.
be it production or even your dev accounts.
Yeah.
I like it. All right.
Yeah.
Put that as a tip.
So moving on to to cost and thinking about it in perspective of what you want to do before you launch. Our customers have told us that lowering their cloud spend this year is a top priority, and we're definitely hear them. I mean, ever since I think as of September 2022, AWS has lowered our prices like 129 times.
Wow.
And it's something that is near to our heart. We want to help you deploy cost-efficient workloads on AWS. If I look at trying to understand how do I implement a cost-effective solution, I have a lot of SaaS customers, so I look at it from a SaaS lens, and it's all about margins, right? So you have a cost of goods sold, which is, if you think about it from a cloud spend perspective, it's your AWS costs, and then your pricing tiers. So before launching, it's something to keep in mind of, are your margins going to scale as your customers scale?
Yes.
And what does that look like? So.
Yeah, and one thing that comes to mind about cost is that sometimes it is not really complicated to implement this. It's sometimes we just miss it out. Say, for example, there's a startup who takes in the photos or the videos and they derive some insights using the machine learning. So usually when people start to develop, the developers, they put everything in the standard storage and really not think about, would I need this for later point of time? As Jason was mentioning, the data retention comes into play here. So most of the times it is like they leave it in standard tier, and when the workloads are small and the application is still gaining traction, it's okay. But then once it becomes popular, you can see how much of data that would come in, and the incurring of cost happens. And to avoid this, all you have to do is set up the lifecycle policy. So these are the certain small things that we need to take care of when you're thinking about the cost perspective.
I love it. I'm just going to go over things quickly. We're starting to wrap up, but yes, this is live. I know some people joined us in the middle of our session. We're covering all different tips of being able to, what you should think about before you launch your startup publicly. And so this is just a checklist of what we're going through. But if you missed it, don't worry, because this is going to go on to AWS Events, the YouTube channel. And you can also go on LinkedIn and see the post of this where the whole video is going to be there as well if you missed any part of it. And we're also doing other sessions on cost optimization. That's just going to focus on that cost optimization for when you're an early stage startup and cost optimization for when you're a mature startup, because there are some subtle differences between the two. So we don't have time to do a full deep dive on that, but it's definitely going to be something we're covered. So stay tuned for that. Anything else? Actually, maybe we should just go quick into support, because I believe how fast this is going.
I know.
So let's go into support.
Yeah, sure. I'll kick it off. When we talk to our customers about launching on AWS, we talk about support levels. So you have basic developer, business, and multiple levels of enterprise support. We recommend that you have at least business support. And there's actually a matrix on the AWS website where you can see the differences. But one of the key pieces is around your SLAs. If anything goes wrong, how quickly can AWS back you up and get you back on your feet again and running? Anu, did you have anything else you wanted to share around support?
Yeah, you can think of support like actually a homeowner's insurance. So you pay for it, but hope you never want to use it. So it's something like, say your house is on fire and you want to call Liberty Mutual at that time. That is not going to happen. By that time, it's too late. So plan prior to that. And as Jason was mentioning, we have the business and enterprise support, wherein there are the SLA posted on the site. You can take a look at that and see how quick AWS response. And again, this goes hand in hand with your RTO and RPO as well. So keep that in mind when you pick your support plan.
Love it. And I also will add something here as well, because I see this a lot with startups who they have business support and they don't really utilize it. They're just using it every month. And I think it's so easy when you're developing and let's say you get stuck on something, to really get tunnel vision on solving the problem and that determination to solve it independently, you'll find a way. But if you open a support case, that support ticket gets routed to a subject matter expert on the service. It's very possible that they've seen the issue that you're spending hours trying to figure out on your own. So go ahead and please be resourceful and work hard to find the problem, but open a support ticket while you're doing that. And so then at least you're in parallel waiting for an answer from someone who might know it because they maybe have seen it hundreds of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'll conclude maybe on the support side with discussing infrastructure event management. So enterprise support, as well as business as well, can utilize this service. Think about it when you're going to launch a new product, you're migrating a major workload, or Black Friday or Cyber Monday. These are key launches that impact your business. And you can utilize a service called IEM, Infrastructure Event Management, where AWS brings in a full team to help you with that specific event. And they'll help you operationally understand all of your service limits. Again, make sure that they're set to the correct levels. They'll even line up specialists for the services that your workload is built on, so that if anything impacts it, those specialists are right on hand to help resolve those issues. So take a look at IEM if you're looking for a large-scale launch.
Yeah, one thing I want to add here is that the IEM is free for enterprise support, and you get one IEM per year, whereas with the business support, it comes with additional fees.
Yeah, and someone is asking if there's costs associated with support, and there are different costs based on the support plan. So you'll definitely want to look those up. But I think as a rule of thumb that we like to all say to startups is, once you're at the point where you have customers, business support is 1,000% worth it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, all right, we're almost finishing up with time, which is crazy. So let's do some parting advice. There's some people who are new here. We definitely have a lot of people who are experienced as well. So let's do some advice for all these different types of people that are here. So Anu, what advice would you give to someone who is getting ready to start their startup?
Yeah. So as you can see, launching on AWS is a complex process, but with careful planning, with all the checklists, the items that we've listed in the checklist and the ones we have discussed, and so it is, you can ensure that you can have a successful launch by following all the best practices. And it is always better to design your workload based on the well-architected framework, the reviews provided in there, and also stay up to date. As you know, AWS is constantly evolving with new services and features being added almost very regularly. And you can stay up to date with the latest development by reading AWS blogs, attending webinars, and also participating in AWS events such as this.
Yeah, I'll add to what Anu said, but put a little bit different spin on it. I mean, launching on AWS is intimidating. And look at this checklist that Jillian put together. And we didn't even finish all the content today. We didn't cover observability in some other areas. But have fun with this, right? Like, so one way that you can have fun with it among deploying is create game days. So gamify how you run your scenarios for launching. Gamify your disaster recovery scenarios and gamify security, right? So run a game day with your team and have fun learning how to troubleshoot a nefarious breach and then resolve it in your environment. Just, that would be my parting advice. Have fun.
I love it. I'll give one piece of advice is set the time. I know this is a big checklist that we've gone over today. After this, schedule some time. There's probably maybe 1, 2 multiple things that you can go and review. Hey, have I done auto scaling? Have I increased my service limits? Have I defined my RTO and RPO? Mike suggests Chaos Monkey. That's definitely one way that you can have fun with it.
Yeah, thanks, Mike.
Of being able to test your reliability. Have fun with it. And if you schedule and take it at a small piece of a time, that's when it gets manageable. Because I get it. You all have so many other different priorities that you're doing at the same time. But if you schedule it and just focus on a little bit of a chunk, then that's how this massive checklist can really feel manageable. Thank you all for joining here today. We do this every single Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time, 1 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. UTC. So next week, we are going over customer acquisition tactics. That's going to be a business session, but that one is from a gentleman who has sold multiple B2B startups in the SaaS space. So you're definitely going to want to get some of those questions in as well. But then we've got machine learning we're going to be talking about on March 28th, and then cost optimization for early stage startups on April 4th. All at the same time. But of course, if you have any questions, any topics that you want to learn about that can help you be able to build your startup, maybe you're a developer in a startup, let me know on Twitter at Miss Jill Ford. We do this every single Tuesday. So thank you so much. And I love all the comments of everyone is helping each other. Mike, thank you so much. Lazy Coder 3, I see you every single week. I love it. Nisha, thank you. DJ, thank you. And stick around because the next session after this is all about security, and that's with a security specialist. So you definitely want to get your security questions answered. That's going to be with Kyle on lockdown. That's what he covers. But stick around for it. That's what's going to be next. So thank you so much, everyone. And I can't wait to see you next week.
Bye now.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.